Okay, so I'm working on my 2008 Mazda 6 here today, and we're going to be replacing a lot of these front suspension parts. And I just wanted to show you what I have here. I know it's a lot of parts. It's not going to make a whole lot of sense at this point, but basically we've got the lower ball joints and arms, and we have the upper components. We have some end links, and we have some inner and outer tie rods, and everything is pretty much worn out under this car. And why I'm doing it is because they're so badly worn it can't even be aligned at this point. So I knew this is something that had to be addressed, and we're going to go through these parts one at a time so it kind of makes sense to you as we're replacing this stuff. It seems like a lot, but it's not really that bad. Now, as far as tools, you don't really need anything special except for this inner tie rod tool. You will be needing this to get that inner tie rod out, and I'll show you how that works. And some of these pickle forks work really well if you can get one. Now, I just got these as loaner tools from AutoZone, so just put a deposit and then you can just take it back and get your money. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm not just going to go through here and show you because these parts won't really make any sense at this point, but we'll go through them one at a time and I'll show you what each of them is. But like I said, the reason is because we've got a lot of squeaks and a lot of slack in the front end, like the steering and everything. There's a lot of slack and there's a lot of squeaks and rattles, and just this stuff is completely worn and needs to be replaced. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're just getting ready to break these lugs loose here before we lift it up. I've got the parts laid out here, and just wanted to show you a comparison to the old ones here, and you can see the type of damage. And these things are just, they shouldn't be moving like that. You see the dry rot and the bushings, and these are just, none of these ball joints are any good, and they're just all wallered out. And you can see the type of rot and everything on all of these bushings. This one here is really bad. This one of these the smaller lower control arm is completely separated. You can just about push it out. This ball joint here in particular is just so loose that it just flops around. So this one was probably the absolute worst. Sure, where a lot of the noise is coming from. This same thing here. Inner tie rod wasn't so bad. Of course, I had replaced the rack and pinion recently, so it didn't have a lot of miles on it. Same here, the tie rod, a little bit loose, but not bad. But anyways, we got everything just laid out here, and we're just going to get started. So I'm going to break these lugs. Now, I just also wanted to say that, of course, this is just one side. I got the kit for the parts for both sides, and I was out $168, which is a really good deal for this kit. It's really best if you can just to go ahead and replace all this stuff, because you're going to be going back and doing it eventually. But yeah, that takes care of everything. I'll leave a link. These got a 10-year warranty on them. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get these lugs broke loose, and we'll get it jacked up here. Okay, so we got our wheels chocked in the back, and I've just positioned here. Just don't block right there this piece, because you'll need to remove that later. And just got a jack stand position, and we're just going ahead and removing these lugs here, and we're going to go ahead and get our tire off. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to work on is this tie rod, because I want this loose so I can move it around. So we're just going to go ahead and tackle this first. Now, I've took a piece of tape, just any kind of tape that'll work, and wrapped it tightly close to that where that nut is, and this is just to mark the approximate location. It's not going to matter a whole lot because you will have to have this aligned, but you can get it close until you can get down and have it lined up. So that's just to mark that for now. So we're going to go ahead and get this cotter pin loose, and then we'll go ahead and work on popping this out. Okay, before I take this loose, I've got a 3/4 open end on this part of the tie rod, and I just like to prop it up against that just to keep it from moving. And I've got a 13/16, and we're on this right here, and what I do is just take my rubber mallet and just give it a whack, just enough to break it loose, and that's good enough. And we're going to go ahead and take our 17mm and get on right here and go ahead and break that loose. Sometimes this thing may try to spin on you, but I'm using an impact. If it does, just try to put it in a little bit of a bind where it'll stop spinning while you break it loose. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this loose. And we'll just take and leave this flush with the very end right there. You can see that. And just give it a good pop with a hammer. And it's about all it takes. Now there's also a tool that you can use, but usually it's better just to hit them than it is to use the tool. But this is a tool you can use to break those loose if you'd rather use something like that. Alright, so anyways, with that out of there, we can just go ahead and turn this. Said I've got this, I've got the tape, so I know about where that's going to go, so I'll just use a tape measure when I put the new one on the new inner tie rod, just to kind of get it in the approximate location. So I'm just going to take this here, will come completely off, and then we'll do the same exact thing with this nut here. And you should get new hardware and everything with your tie rod. You shouldn't have to reuse any of this. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and just take that completely off, and then we'll get to the next step here. So now I need to get my needle nose, and we got a clip right here, and we'll just take that off and just put that aside so you don't lose it. Just holds that dust boot. Good idea to get you a bucket to put everything in. Okay, now with that, we look up in here, and we've got, you can see this right here is just a wire, and it's not real easy to get to, but we have to spin that the best way we can, and turn it counterclockwise to get that wire to release. And let me just show you on another one here what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's one. I can give you a better view of. It's just a twisted wire, and all we have to do is just twist this either by hand or with some pliers in a counterclockwise manner to get it to release. It's just holding this dust boot on here. Once we get it past a certain point there, you can see how it'll completely loosen up enough to where we can slip it off. Like that. And you can see how they just loop around one another. So anyways, you don't even really have to slip that completely off, because this should, at this point, just pop right off. So then we got this little part off of this end, and now we can just work on sliding this boot off. And you might use some spray lubricant down here, because this end is kind of tight, but it should, you should be able to twist it off. So that's the exact thing that I'm going to do in the car there, and it'll be a little bit harder to show you. That's all I'm doing, is just slipping this off, and it gives us access. Okay, so when you're slipping this boot off, get you a screwdriver under there like that and kind of run it around it, and it'll make it easier to slide this thing off. Okay, so there's that slipped off of there, and now we can get access in here to this. And so these things, you would be surprised how much slack you can get in these, and it'll start making you think you got other things wrong. So it's this little inner tie rod can get a lot of slack, and I've seen them very loose and cause the excess play in the steering wheel. So up in here we've got a clip that goes around this. You can see the side ones here aren't a problem, but I need to get these top ones folded up so I can get in here with my inner tie rod tool. I'm going to fold those back. See, there's one there, there's one on the bottom. Let me show you. So you got this little piece here that goes around, and all I'm going to do is take a screwdriver and bend this back. I don't really even know what the purpose of it is, but it's in the way of me getting my tool on here, so I have to bend that back. There's a tab there, and then there's one right there on the bottom. I have to bend that back to be able to get my tool on there. Okay, so there we have that, just folded back, just like that. Same for the bottom. Just got it folded back. Just took and bent it up with a screwdriver and tapped it with a hammer a little bit. Okay, so here is our inner tie rod tool. Now the kit, let me show you here. Okay, this is the kit. It comes with an assortment of sizes. Now I have determined that an 1 7/16 is going to work out the best. So now we just have to slip this on there. So the end of this tie rod tool has a 1/2 inch fitting for my breaker bar, and we flip it over. This end has the slots where you put this. I'm going to put this on to the inner tie rod, and then I'm going to slide this tool in, so when this goes in, it'll fit, it'll line it up, and it'll fit right over this, just like that. Essentially it makes a big long socket type wrench, and then once you get it on there, you can slide this like so, and that just kind of locks it, keep it from moving around. So we're going to go ahead and just set this up in here on there like that. and of course we're going to go counterclockwise. So we're going to go ahead and get the tool on there, and it just slides right over this, and just like that, and then we can reach in and slide that up like so, and that just kind of holds it there. So now we'll get our breaker bar on here and go ahead and break it loose. I don't need both hands, but it's not, with this tool it's nothing. You get a breaker bar on there, it'll come right loose. Okay, so I've got it loose, so I'm just working on finishing it up here, spinning it off, and there we have it. Slide this back, and there's that. So I got the tape where I can halfway get it right. Maybe it's not really going to matter. I'm going to have to get it aligned. Here's this thing. Like I said, don't really know the purpose other than it's like just some kind of safety clip thing, but it lines up with these little grooves here, and it won't spin when it's on there, and then those tabs just lock, crimp back around. Now problem is when I tighten it, I've got to get it lined up so those tabs will go back over the flat part. So worst case scenario, if it doesn't want to line up after I've tightened it, I'll put the replacement one that come with it, which doesn't have these little divots here, so it doesn't matter how it goes on. As I said, it kind of defeats the purpose, but anyways, we'll go ahead and get the new tie rod. We'll put some Loctite on it. So I got my Loctite on there. I'm gonna go ahead and just spin this back on here. And you can really tell the difference with these new ones. They're going to be really tight, which you want. It needs to be able to move, but it doesn't need to be able to move that much. So we'll go ahead and get our tool back on here in that manner and slip this back on, and we're going to tighten it. I'm going to go 80 foot-pounds and see where it's at. I want at least 80 foot-pounds, and if it's not to the flat spots, I'm going to give it some more and turn it until I can get my little clips, and then we're just going to hammer those back down. I'll show you that. Okay, so here we are torquing this. Got it to 80 foot-pounds already, and I'm just going to pull it off here and look and see what I've got. Okay, and you can see where I'm at. I need to go a little bit more here. The flat's right here where my finger's at. There's the tab. So I'm going to get my breaker bar on here, and we're just going to snug it some more and see if we can get this thing into position here. Okay, so I just had to give it a little more turn, and now the flats are lined up. I'm just going to bend it down with the pliers and get it the rest away with this hammer. And then nothing critical. We're just going to tap it back down onto there, top and bottom, the best we can. Okay, so we got those bent down. I just kind of took the hammer in there and got a hold of it and just kind of pried and bent them back down. Which is plenty good enough. And we've also got a little packet of grease that it come with, and we're going to put that grease all in here before we slide this boot back on here. Okay, so now we're ready to put this boot back on. I went ahead and put the little clamp on, and we've got that grease on there. We're just going to slide this straight on, and we just have to get it on that lip, and you can hear it when it snaps on there. So now the hardest part is getting up in here with your fingers and twisting it and everything to get it clamped back on there. And also don't forget to put this one right back on here. Okay, and so just twist that thing on there the best you can. Worst case scenario, just get you a zip tie, because it is very difficult to get in there and try to twist that. Okay, so I've measured. So when I put the old one, I got 1 3/16 inches. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We'll measure this. I actually like this OEM nut better, so I'm going to reuse it. So we'll just screw this on down, measure it with our tape measure there. I'm going to put a little Loctite on there as well. Okay, so here's our tie rod. It's going to point up like that, and that was actually 1 5/8 inches. I misspoke, but I'm going to put a little Loctite, and I've measured with my tape measure. So I just took and measured down about 1 5/8 inches, and so that's going to be about as close as you're going to get it, and you're going to have to get it aligned. So we'll put some Loctite and we'll screw this down until it stops, and then we're just going to go ahead and jam these together. Like I said, this is only going to be an approximate until you get this aligned, because more especially replacing all these components, this stuff is going to change a lot. So we're going to get our wrenches, got our 3/4, we're going to put it on here, and then we'll go ahead and jam these together and get them as tight as we can get them by hand. So one thing you can do is kind of wedge that wrench like that, and then get your other one, and you got to hold this and stabilize it. Then get a hold of this and just tighten this as tight as you can. And once I get it as snug as I can get it, take my mallet again and give it a good hit or two. Okay, so we got that plenty tight enough for now. We're just going to move that back out of our way, and now I can move this as I need it. So the next thing that we're going to do is get on these lower control arms, and you can see the condition these are in. This in here, more especially, just really horrible. So we're going to go ahead and work on this one right here first, and the first thing we're going to do is get a hold of this, a 23mm, and we'll break that loose. And you'll need a big breaker bar for sure. And get it broke loose, but don't take the nut off just yet. Okay, and you can see I'm using my breaker bar and a big cheater pipe here. These are really tight. Now I actually got a 24mm 6-sided, and it will work. It's virtually impossible for it to strip on a 6-sided like this, because the 23s don't come standard. If you want, you could go ahead and break your other one loose while you're at it. Okay, so I've just left the nut on there, you can see, and I'm just knocking this thing. I started out with this one and knocking it up, and this is actually the sleeve that's coming out. I found that it's easier to do it this way than to try to pry that out of that ball joint out of there, and more especially if you're up north where you got a lot of rust. These things do not want to come loose, and just almost to the point where I'm uncomfortable banging on the car because it's so tight in there. So I just knocked the sleeve out because it comes out pretty easy, and I'm just left the nut on there. I've pretty much got it knocked completely out of there at this point. I said it will come out without too much trouble, and that's all there is to that. So we're going to do that for now. If you were taking these loose, this would be the easier way to do it. You know, just be cautious, don't damage your threads or anything, but I like to keep the nut on there until I get it pretty well knocked out. So now we got to get over here and get to this. You'll notice the frame is in the way, so we've got to lower this here. So I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so we're going to have to come back here under the car. You see back here at the back of this, as we come underneath, we're going to have some bolts here to remove. We've got 15, a 15, and then we got this 21 millimeter nut right here. So we're just going to get under here and remove these now. Okay, the 21 millimeter here first. Okay, and don't lose your washer. And then we're going to get on our 15s. And it's kind of get a hand on it there. Okay, and that's got some wires. Don't worry about none of that. Just let it hang there. Okay, now we're going to crawl back out here. I'll show you the next step. Okay, we're up here at the front. We need a 8 millimeter, and we're going to come right up here. You see this big hole, and we're going to get our 8 millimeter and take this one screw out here, and then we can just pull this flap out of our way now. And we look right here, we've got a 21 millimeter for this frame. Now, don't be scared that this frame is going to fall, by no means. It's about all you can do just to get a little bit of slack even at this. We're going to take this nut here completely off. Okay, so here we are getting this one. And some of these you may have to use a breaker bar. Okay, so there's that nut and washer, and my impact wasn't wanting to cut it. I had to get my breaker bar a hold of it. Okay, now I'm taking my handle on my big sledgehammer here, and you can notice that I can push this down enough to get a little slack. And you notice that nothing fell, even with all those out. So I've got enough here where I can get some slack to get to that bolt there now, and that's going to be a 15 millimeter. I like to double up wrenches like this so I can get some extra leverage on it where need be. Sometimes you just can't get a ratchet in where you want. We're going to go ahead and continue on getting this loose. I'm going to get my ratchet wrench over here. Okay, and using my long handle here, said I recommend using something wooden or something so you don't damage anything. But anyways, you need something where you can pull down on it, and you can see that I got enough slack to slip it out of there. So now I've got this loose. We can go ahead and wiggle this thing out of here, and you can see the condition of these bushings. Lots of dry rot, and this here just completely destroyed. But anyways, you can get just enough slack to get it out of there that way. So we're going to take it over here, and now we got the fun job of getting this sleeve off here. And this is actually, pressed down in that ball joint. And like I said, if you're up north, sometimes these things you'll break separators, pullers. I've tried using these and everything, and these things won't budge. You really have to hit them, and you got to hit them hard. So anyways, we're going to take it over here, show what we're going to do next. Okay, so as far as removing this thing, there's several different ways. I've seen people use one of these, and they slip it on here and they hit it with a hammer. could also, just pretty much anything you can slip in there on this thing. You can slip a wrench in here and you can hit this. Said anything that you can slip in here to be able to knock that off there. Now you might also be able to put it, if you got a vise, to set it in there and clamp this up above the vise and hit this right here. But you really do need the force of hitting this thing. Now what I've been using is my pickle fork, and I just slide it in here and I'll get it all the way in, and then I'll hammer it right here. Now that's the method I prefer. It's what's been working for me. But before I do that, I'm going to get me some gloves, and you notice I've got my torch here, and you know, this heat does help. It definitely makes it come off a little bit easier. So I'm going to get my gloves on. We're going to heat this thing up. Okay, and you know, definitely give this thing quite a bit of heat. And I would imagine that, and you know, be careful, don't catch nothing on fire, because you've got grease and rubber and oil and stuff. But be careful. But you do have to heat this thing up. It probably even work really well if you froze it and then slap the heat to this thing. But this has been working for me. It's definitely easier than trying to pickle fork it out of there in the car. I just simply didn't want to work at all. I've not found it to work for me, period. But we're going to heat this thing up and then we'll try to hit it. Okay, so I think I got this heated up pretty well. I'm just going to slide my fork in. You may have to hit on this for a bit, so just don't give up. You may have to reheat it. Okay, so I had to hit on it a little bit more there. It didn't take much more after I paused it, but like I said, that heat really seems to work. And you just hit this thing right here to break it loose. Now we're going to have to let that cool off before we can go put it back on the knuckle. And when I put this thing back on, I'm going to grease the new ball joint and grease the inside of that sleeve as well. Hopefully the next time I have to mess with it, it won't stick so bad. Okay, so we've got our new control arm, the bigger of the two, and we're going to go ahead and set it into here, and we can move this knuckle around as need be, but we're going to go like that and just get it set into place. We'll go ahead and put some Loctite on this before I put this in. Okay, and again, we're going to get our handle in here, and we're going to have to push this thing down here and to be able to work that, wiggle that back into place, and it will move. It moves just enough to be able to get it. Okay, so I actually had to get an extra set of hands out here. Getting it out was no problem, but putting it back in, I had to get someone to push the bolt in while I pressed down on it. It was no problem. I had plenty of slack. Now I will say that this side is a little bit more difficult than the passenger, because you got the steering and everything attached to it. I mean, you could take some more bolts loose, but it's really not necessary. You just need to move it that little bit to slide the bolt in. So we've got this. We're going to go ahead, we got Loctite on this, line it up, wiggle it around till it lines up, and then we're just going to snug it for now. We're not going to tighten anything. Okay, so we're just getting this bolt in here. Like I said, I'm just going to I'm just going to run it down, not going to tighten it or anything. We'll do that later. Okay, so now we've got to get on this mount, or this control arm here. We've got a few things holding it. The first thing that we're going to do is get this 15 millimeter that's running through this strut fork. We're just going to go ahead and take this out, and you'll just need to get on this side here. You've got a nut that's got a little hook on it that keeps it from spinning. It'll rotate around and hit. So just go ahead and take this 15 millimeter out right here next. Okay, so this will come off when you get that loose, and you'll just have to work on getting this bolt here out. And we're going to go ahead, we've got a 15 millimeter. We'll go ahead and take this loose on this fork as well. Okay, so just pull that out. And with that, it leaves up the tension on this, where you can go ahead and slide this piece out of here. We'll just set those aside, and then that'll just drop down off of here. Now we do have this stabilizer link that we'll need to take loose, so we'll go ahead and get a hold of that. That's going to be a 14. Okay, so when taking these loose, you'll slip a 5 millimeter into that Allen head, and you'll use a 14 millimeter because it'll try to spin on you. Okay, so now we can just set this aside, and it's really, we don't have to take it loose. It's going to be kind of in the way, so we're just going to go ahead and get it off of there for now. So now we can, I think while we're right here at it, take a 12 millimeter and get our brake line here loose. And so we've got that loose, and we just put the bolt back on there for now. And you'll notice that the only thing holding the strut is going to be the 3 14 millimeter nuts up top at this point. We've just pushed this back out of the way. I don't really need to take it off. So now that we've got that out, it's cleared up from here, we're going to go ahead, and the same way that we handled this other one, we're going to get under here, break this loose if it hasn't been already, 23 millimeter, and we'll go ahead and start hitting that, and just going to tap that whole sleeve and everything up and out of there, and then we'll get the final bolt. Okay, and like before, just taking my sledge, and we're just hitting it here with the nut still on there, and you can see how it's the sleeve is lifting up there. And I'll just loosen it a little bit more, and just continue hitting it until I get it most of the way out, and then I'll use my smaller hammer. I really don't have to be gentle with this because I'm not reusing either the ball joint, the nut, or anything. I got all new hardware, so I don't have to, it doesn't matter if I damage it or not. Okay, and I will say this, don't assume you're going to do any of this with a little 16-ounce hammer. You're definitely going to need to get you a big mallet of some sort. But as far as I've seen, these sleeves usually come out fairly easy. But it's separating that ball joint's the problem. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get on the next bolt, which say I'm right here on this side. We got to go back underneath here, and we're going to have, so here we are at the front, and you just look on back through here. There's the bolt hiding right there, and that's going to be a 15 millimeter as well, and you can get in there with an extension or anything, and this one's no big deal whatsoever to get out, and once that's out, this will be completely loose. So we're going to go ahead and get in there and take that loose now. Okay, so here we are in here like so. And I'll just reach up in there and pull that the rest of the way out. And there's that bolt. So now we can just wiggle this right on out of here. And again, this one was the same on the other side. This bushing, and you can see I can push this thing completely out. Another one was the same way. This control arm in particular really takes a beating, it seems. And again, this ball joint is worse than the other one. See, it's tore there, but the other one was too. But this one in particular, extremely loose. And I can only assume that this one is causing the majority of the noise, it seems. But the other one, I mean, all of them were bad, but this one, by comparison, way worse than the others. And you can see that just ripped and come plumb out of there. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get our new one over here. Okay, about to get ahead of myself. We got to get over here and we got to get this sleeve off. So we need to go ahead and get the torch, start heating that up. Definitely have you some gloves, and knock that thing off. Let's say anything you can find to knock it off with. Like I said, I've used a wrench when I didn't have the pickle fork, and anything that you can do to, you know, to knock it down off of there, or to hold this up in a vise and to hit it here. But you just need to knock. You really need that hammer and force. And I'm just using a 16-ounce hammer. I'm sure a bigger mallet would make it a little bit easier. So people use these as well. You can slip it on there and hit this thing. I've seen them do that, and that works pretty well too. But anyways, I like to use the pickle fork, and that's how I've been doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and get the heat on here, because it does make a difference. I tried it without it, and it was way more difficult. Like I said, be cautious. When this gets hot, it tries to catch that rubber boot. Now, on the last one, I wind up just cutting the thing off of there before doing this, but just be cautious that you don't catch it on fire. I just crammed the pickle fork on there this time. Hopefully not going to have as much trouble this time. Okay, believe it or not, that only took about 6 good whacks, even with this little 16-ounce, to knock it off of there. I said, if this is going to be your most difficult task, is getting these sleeves off. Just a note, I mean, I don't know where you can even find these at, so don't damage them. You'd probably have to go to the dealer, and I'm sure, like anything else, they're going to be real expensive. So you need to get these off. You know, if you just didn't want to mess with them, like I say, take them to a machine shop and have them pop them off there for you. But this will be your most difficult thing, so I would say work on these first and see how it goes. See if you can pop those things off of there. Said other people have simply used these pickle forks and been able to separate them on the car, but I've not had any luck. This is way easier to me to get it out here, you know, where I can pound on it and use a torch. So this is the way I do them, and it seems to be the simplest way for me. So anyways, we'll let that cool. We'll go ahead and work on getting our new one on here. Said it comes with the replacement components, the nuts and stuff. We will have to slip those sleeves in there. I haven't done that as of yet, but we're just going to take this for now, and we're going to work on sliding it back into here. It's not a big deal, but we want to get our bolt going in to this back part back here first. So we're going to get down under here again, and we'll get some Loctite on this And you can come back here and look and see that you're lining this up. And this is the main reason you want to get this in, because it's going to be more difficult to line this bolt up. If you had this locked in to place, it's going to make it harder on you. So we're going to get some Loctite and go ahead and put this bolt in. Okay, so I've just got that bolt going into that back there, and we have not tightened it. We still have it loose. Now we're going to work on putting these sleeves in. I'm just going to kind of clean them up a little bit and apply a little grease to cut down on the rust, and then I'm going to go ahead and just start slipping them in to their spots. I'll have to move this back up out of the way. Okay, so I've greased this sleeve thoroughly inside and out. Kind of got a little rust off of it. Just getting ready to put it back into place here. And probably wouldn't be a bad idea to clean some of this up as well, but usually it'll go back into place without too much difficulty. Just lightly tap it back into place. Okay, and with it lined up straight, I'm just going to be lightly tapping it here back into place. Usually doesn't take a lot. Just like I said, be careful and don't damage it. And if you can't get it knocked down all the way, get it most of the way, the ball joint will pull it back down there. That's all there is to that. Okay, and when messing with this, I just wanted to point out, now I'm thinking about it, be careful, do not overextend your CV axle. This joint up here is bad to want to pop out. So be careful, don't just be yanking around on this a whole lot. But with those seated down good enough, I'm going to go ahead and move this into position here. And we're going to slide it right down into place. And we'll do the same thing with this other one now that we've got the sleeve back in there. Okay, and all I did on this side is just hit it right here just to tap it back down in there. And we got that through the bottom so we can get our big nut back on there. These come with Loctite on them already, so I don't have to worry about that. So we'll just get this on here so it's not popping back out while I'm messing with the other one. Okay, and this one I got in place just simply by picking up on this a little bit. And you notice that the strut fork's not attached to anything, so it's no problem moving this thing around. So we'll just go ahead and get our nut back on here now. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and snug this one down here. And when this gets tightened, it'll pull all this, even if the sleeve wasn't all the way down, it'll pull it all back down in there. And we're going to have to get our torque wrench, and I'm going to be going 130 foot-pounds on these. Okay, so now just tighten this to 130 foot-pounds. It's going to take quite a bit of force to get it there. We're going to tighten them both. Okay, so with those torqued, congratulations, you've made it through the toughest part of this whole ordeal. Okay, so now we got to work on getting this upper mount here. Now, all we have is this bolt right here. I believe it's a 17. We're going to go ahead and get that loose, and like I said, I just whack these things with a hammer, but if you like, you can always use the actual tool to press it up and off there. So that's going to be the first item I'm going to remove. Okay, and with that loose, just leave it about there so you can hit it with your hammer, and we're just going to knock that up and off there. Like I said, if you were just taking this loose, you'd want to be cautious. You might even use the tool, but usually if I put the nut flush, I've never damaged the thread. But it's going to take a few hits, and it helps if you have a bigger hammer than this. Okay, with the limited room and my small hammer, I wasn't getting this one, so I switched over to this tool, and it's got a place where this will fit in the bottom, and we'll just pop it off there with that. You can see it didn't take a whole lot to finish getting it, but sometimes they want to be stubborn. One thing to note is this thing is going to flop up. It is under tension. Just be cautious when taking that off so it doesn't fly and hit you or anything, and keep your hands out of the way. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and move up top and get the hood open here next. I've got 3 14 millimeters to take loose, and we're going to take the strut out of here. So it's only three nuts, not a big deal. There's no need in fighting with it. You'll notice that these bolts are coming up through here, and we're going to run into problems. We're going to be hitting the spring and everything. Just no sense in this even being in here for now with just 3 nuts holding it. Okay, and there's those out. Lost one of them. It went flying to who knows where. But this thing is completely loose, and it's no problem if you can get a few things out of your way anyways. It loves to hang up on this brake line here though, every single time. But anyways, we'll set that aside. Okay, now we're just gonna get up here and work on getting these out. I think those are 13 millimeters. We'll find out here. Okay, so we're just getting these 13 millimeters here on each side. And once you start taking these loose, this thing will just kind of flop down here like so. We got this side. Let's get over there and get that one next. Okay, so this is ready to come out of here now, and you can see the shape these are in. Definitely make sure that you have the right one. Goes on the right side. So we're just going to fit this back into place, and then we'll work our bolts right back into where they go here. Okay, so I've got some Loctite on these, and I'm just barely snugging them down for the moment. Okay, so now I'm just going to lift this back up into place and slide it into here. Okay, so now I'm just tightening this nut. All I had to do is lift this up and kind of pull that down. Said be careful with your CV axle. This is a locking nut here as well, so you don't need any Loctite, or at least this one is. Okay, this here I'm going 45 foot-pounds. Okay, without the strut, this virtually has no pressure on it. You can just almost lift it into place, but for whatever reason, it's supposed to be preloaded with about 15 to 16 inches, somewhere around there, to the center line of this up to here. So just using a tape measure, and since we've got it there, we're going to go ahead and tighten. I'm going to go 50 foot-pounds on these, and then we'll get on these down here. I'm going to go about 75, 80 foot-pounds on those, going through these arms, because now they're into position. Now on this one, because of the difficulty getting in here with a ratchet, I'm just going to be going by feel, just using a wrench and my big cheater bar. I'm just going to be getting it really, really tight. Okay, I was just torquing this one, going through the shorter control arm here to the 80 foot-pounds. Okay, and just to show you what I'm talking about, I got my tape measure, the fender well, and I'm kind of eyeballing the center line here about where you want it. So I don't know that it makes a whole lot of difference, but they claim that's where it's supposed to be. Okay, and with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get back under here. Remember, we took our frame under here loose, so we're going to need to tighten everything. And I just usually get everything really tight here. So we've got the two 15 millimeters there, and we got that big nut there. Okay, so we just attached the 15 on this bracket, and then the 21. Now we're going to move up here and get the nut right back on there and washer, and we'll be tightening that back down, and then that'll have our subframe. Okay, so after attaching the frame there, I put the 8 millimeter back into the flap, slid that into place, and we come over here. We've been working on put this little end link back into place, and we slid this in here. Remember, you've got to hold it with Allen wrench and 15 millimeter. We've got our strut put back into place, loosely put the nuts in there. We went ahead and put the pinch bolt back through here on the strut, and we've slid our 15 millimeter bolt to the bottom, lined this up, and fasten it through this side, and it's holding right there. Torque this down to 80 foot-pounds. I went 60 foot-pounds on this, and now I'm just putting the end link in, and we're going ahead. We slipped our tie rod back into place. We're going to go 45 foot-pounds on this next. Okay, so we went ahead and put the cotter pin back in there, and so we got that torque down. And now we need to put our brake line back on here. Just got a 12 millimeter, just snug that down a little bit. Okay, and I only went 32 foot-pounds on that, by the way. We just snugged this back into place. And we just double checked everything. It said 60 foot-pounds. I went on this, 80 on the bottom. And I'm just getting ready to snug these top ones. I'm only going to go about 25 foot-pounds on these. They don't have to be terribly tight. Okay, now that we've double checked everything, we've tightened up our nuts on the strut, we're ready to go ahead and get our wheel back on. Like I said, always double check everything, make sure you got everything torqued down right. Said the lower ball joints are going to be your biggest trouble, so we're ready to go ahead and get our wheel back on and get it lowered back down to the ground here. Alright, so that's going to conclude this video. This is definitely a big project. You know, of course I was filming a little bit too, but started around 9 and I'm finishing up about 1, so you know, you definitely want to make sure you take your time and do it right anyways. But like I said, hopefully, you know, you found it helpful. Give it a thumbs up, and that's going to conclude the video. As always, I invite you to subscribe, and I thank you for watching.